أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I welcome you all in our today's online session. Hope you all are fine and having good health. We start today's session with the verse of Holy Quran. We further continue our today's session. In last we was discussed about the zone protection, further the primary and backup protection, details, consequences, possibilities, and what are the further effects of fault that produce and affect the power system by these kind of uh, failure of protection or of failure of primary protection or backup protection that we discussed in last session. And already we was discussed in previous session about zone of protection and the single line diagram, and even in this diagram we are also discuss the concept of zone overlapping with each other. You can also seen in this figure that different kind of zones 1 to 6 onwards are link, share with each other their fault possibilities and flow of power, and the effect that create one of zone to another and by other. So the sharing and overlapping of zone electrical parameters and effects are represented in dotted lines. The concept we also and already discussed in our previous slide. And previous slide's last discussion was in this figure zones of protection, that how the concept of zone of protection is categorized by different kind of loads. Having said that, these different loads are categorized and depend from generation to utilization, and this whole power system are divided into different kind of zones, which is first it was start with generation aspect. Okay, we further continue this slide. Up till now, if you have any kind of question or query in this slide or in previous slide, you can feel free to discuss. I will answer the kind of question and resolve your queries if you have in your mind. So feel free to discuss. In previous session, we was discussed about zone protection of this block diagram from the starting of generation to load utilization and power transmission. Further circuitry also we discussed in previous sessions. The rectangular block or square block reflect the protection equipment, which are protection relays, and specifically these are the circuit breaker for protection purpose. These are also driven by the another kind of circuitry, which is the bus bar of load, further another single circuits. These are a single line diagram which I called them single circuit, but it is also discussed. It is also derived by another three phase of loads. It is a single line diagram, and this is mainly a diagram of overlapping zone of protection. Further, okay, up till now, anyone of you, if have any kind of question, query, or difficulty, you feel free to discuss with me. I will answer the kind of question and resolve your queries if you have in your mind. And if you have no kind of question, so further we are moving towards the zone protection, that the mutual sharing of prospect of one zone by another from 1 towards 5 are interlinked and overlapping with each other. I am taking a small 5 minutes of break and request you guys to read out and analyze this figure and find out what are the findings and your observation in this sharing or overlapping of zone 1 by each other of 5. So I'm starting the break right now. You are requested to see this zone protection diagram and analyze it. I'm taking a small 5 minutes of break and please see these things. sorry for the interruption. I very much apologize with you guys. uh, मेरी आवाज क्लियर आ रही है आप लोगों को? जी कोई मुझे कंफर्म कर दे मेरी आवाज क्लियर आ रही है, डिस्टरबेंस तो नहीं?
यस सर, आवाज क्लियर आ रही है।
ओके, थैंक यू वेरी मच। Further, we continue the session, zones of protection, and so we discussed about the session that how much different kind of zones are being shared with each other from 1 towards 5. In zone 1, you can see it is interlink and share with zone 3, 2, 5, and 4 respectively in sequential way, and different kinds of loads are divided into aspects of generation side, step up transformer to step up the voltages, and the protection equipment of circuit breaker and relays are out there, and further is provides its electrical power to the common bus. Common bus drive that electrical energy for the circuit breaker to the power transmission line and further provide that electrical power through the circuit breaker to the bus of load of utilization further. Towards that, we can suppose that this power of transmission would be 500 kV and provided at 500 kV to another circuit of 220 kV. Toward after this step down, and then the common bus also drive the zone 4, in which the direct supply provide to the load that would be the grid of another load. Then later on in zone number 5, you can see that zone is driven by a circuit breaker, and then the power is stepped down in terms of voltages, and then another protection of circuit breaker provide the circuit to the load of utilization. That categorization would be mentioned here. First protection, that zone nominate as a burst protection, and we are monitoring and controlling here the specific zone number 1 of burst protection. Now we are talking about the zone protection, that zone 2, that is dedicated with the generator protection aspects. This zone is specifically dedicated to the generator protection aspects. Further, the zone number 3 is substrain sub-transmission line of power protection, in which the power appliances of protection also provided there to protect that electrical power by any kind of short circuit and abnormalities. Further, in zone number 4, that is feeder protection, and further that particular supply is provided to the another feeder of either that would be 220 kV or 132 kV of feeder that is driven by this zone. At the end, the zone number 5 drive by the portion of transformer protection, in which you can see after the circuit breaker, power circuit breaker, electrical power is stepped down further by the transformer to further utilize the load, and that particular load zone is highlight as transformer protection, and further load is utilized by that loop number 5. Up till now, the whole zone of protection that is categorized in different substantial and subdivision of load, which is mutual sharing and overlapping with each other, have been covered in this slide. Up till now, if you have any kind of question or difficulty in your mind, please feel free to discuss. I will answer the kind of question and resolve your queries if you have. Hopefully, all the things are clear. So we further moving towards the next slide, that is feeder protection. So particularly now the diagram is same, but we are specifically create an artificial fault and analyze the consequences and the abnormality that is produced in our power system. Now we are discussed in singular regions of the zones. So now in zone number 4, you can see this circuit is dedicated to feeder, and feeder is driven by this circuit. So an artificial fault or a natural fault have been created in this zone. Then the impact of this fault would also be back and forth. Back means back towards the common bus, and that fault also insert in this circuit, and this one even also. So meanwhile, the protection equipment of circuit breaker also provided there out there to prevent that particular fault from this circuitry. So that's the reason we insert that protection equipment, that particularly these are the protection relays and power circuit breakers to prevent the fault and save the power transmission line for the transformer and generator, and even a generating station of transformer also prevent the fault, particularly in this aspect or prospects. So an artificial fault is also if create, then effect also back and forth. Fourth means it moving the fault when create it into the load or another driving circuit. And fourth means it, yeah, this one is fourth, and back means it back to the other kind of circuitry. So it other kind of circuits, load generators also affect by this particular load. So it is very substantial concept of fault when it creates to prevent that system particularly from that fault. So we further moving towards the fault that is created in zone number 1. I think all the people have very well known about the zone number 1 towards 5. This zone we called a zone number 2, zone number 1, zone number 2, 3, 4 and 5. Again I repeat, this zone is specified by the red dotted, we called it a zone number 1. This one is zone number 2, and this circuit is zone number 3. This one is zone number 4, and this circuit is zone number 5. How can I say this thing? Because of this one, zone number 1, 2, 3, 4, and substantially this one is the last, that is zone number 5. So in first we have discussed the artificial fault that is created in the feeder of protection, in feeder, that and what kind of consequences and effect that have been produced after the fault when it is inserted in your feeder circuit. Then we already discussed the consequences and effects that is produced back and forth in the system. Then we moving towards the aspect of bus protection, that is our zone number 1. If the fault, either it is an artificial fault or either it is a natural fault that is created by the other kind of causes, reasons. Suppose the fault is have been created in zone number 1, and zone number 1 is shared by zone number 2, 3, 4 substantially, and zone number 5. So the fault level or fault impact already have been inserted in all the 4 circuits which are mentioned in the overlapping zone. So what are the prevention that we need to integrate here to prevent the fault impact by this 4 circuits? So what are your suggestion that what would be done if a fault have been created in a common bus of the system? Then what are the consequences and effects impact have been created in other kind of zone that are in 4? So what will be your answer? Yes, can anybody tell me? Yes, my friend. Is all thing clear? Can anybody answer my question, what I asked with you guys. Hope my question is clear. So I think I repeat my concept, I repeat my question. I was asked that this is the red dotted line represent a zone specified, which is zone number 1, and it is also shared with zone number 2, 3, 4, and 5. These 4 other particular zones are also mutually linked, overlap with each other in zone number 1. So if a fault have been created in bus, the bus of zone is mutually overlap with each of 4 zones. So we can say that that fault of impact have been also inserted in other kind of zones as well. So we can say we need to prevent that fault effect all these other zones. So what are the prevention that we need to be produced in these 4 zones? So we are not doing anything specifically in this other kind of zone for protection purpose, because already the preventions have been taken against the fault in this diagram. In this diagram, you can see particularly the circuit breaker out there and last there have been already installed there. If a fault is created in the bus, and what kind of faults? The in between of bus bars, any kind of conducting material of medium have been placed in between the plates bus bar, then the bus bar would be affected by that particular load. That would be symmetrical and unsymmetrical. Symmetrical would be categorized by 2 specification, and unsymmetrical fault would be categorized by 3 specification of cases, which already discussed in our 2 previous sessions. So when a fault have been created in our bus bars, then that impact of fault have been also back and forth in these kind of zone of regions as well. So specifically the power circuit breakers of this one have been act during this specification, and then it prevents the fault, prevent the system by this fault until and unless the kind of fault can be permissible limit of short circuit being capacity. You can say uh, service short circuit being capacity and short circuit being capacity. These are the 2 categorization of ICS, ICU, ICW. 3 categorization of fault further in detail, which are ICS, ICU, and ICW. So I am requesting with you guys to understand yourself what is the difference between ICS, ICU, and ICW. So this is a very essential aspect and concept which I already discussed with you guys in our previous sessions of courses. And further moving towards the next slide, uh, up till now, if you have any kind of question, query, difficulty in your mind, please feel free to discuss. I will answer the kind of question and resolve your queries if you have. So please ask. So in this slide, we have been covered the bus protection prospects, effects that a fault if create in this bus, then the impact of fault have been back and forth in these 4 zone of region as well. So I think the concept have been clear in your mind. If you have the kind of question, please discuss. Otherwise, I continue my session with the next slide. Now, transformer protection. Suppose the fault particularly happened in a transformer internal winding, then in this instant the fault effect have been produced in the transformer winding and all over the system of transformer. And if a fault is not controlled by the transformer internal protection aspects and as well the outside and external protection circuitry, then that particular fault would be back and forth. Back means back towards the bus bar, and fourth means forward towards the driving load, that is drive by the load after the circuit breaker. But at the same instant, you can see that in this location of zone, there are two protection equipments of transform of circuit breakers incoming and outgoing have been prevent that particular fault and save the load, prevent the load by this fault level. If a fault create in this winding transformer, either it is an internal fault or either it is an external fault, the fault level of back and forth have been dealt by these power circuit breakers, and fault cannot be inserted in this bus bar even the load in the load driving circuits. Okay, remember this thing. Before the concept of this specification of zone and overlapping concept, we have been already discussed about the primary and backup protections circuitry. So remember this thing, these are the primary protection schemes, but the backup protection already being installed there, which are as a backup protection. If these circuit breakers are fail at the instant, that automatically the backup protection already activated and deal instead of primary protections. So I think the concept have been clear with you guys. What are the primary protection, what are backup protections, that I already shared with you guys in our previous session about these are the backup protection, these are the primary and backup protection. So I already discussed with you guys this kind of details have in our previous session. After primary protection, this one is the backup protection, already we covered in our previous sessions. So this one is the concepts. So transformer protection already been done at this lecture. We further now discuss about the sub transmission line of protection. Suppose an artificial fault or a natural fault have been created in our substantial sub-transmission lines, and that fault level can also be back and forth in this region. So that particular transmission line would be thousands of kilometers, and in effect, it is sometimes it's impossible to find out at which instant of thousand of kilometer how much the fault is created and in which location it have been create the particularly that fault. So it is sometimes too much impossible, but the possibility to finding that the location of fault by impedance relay. So impedance relay used to find out the location of fault, that in which kind of location the fault have been created, because in several kilometers to find that the find out the fault and the breaking of cable, it creates a too much complexity to the maintenance team. So by the distance relay we are able to find fault location when it create what is the location particularly at that fault instant. So the team particularly arrive there and fix the fault by the location of impedance relay. This is the concept of impedance relay. And if the fault is created in this region of zone, then back and forth impact have been null and void by the primary and backup protection and the incoming and outgoing protection scheme. So these are the possibilities, consequences, solution, and how the fault being tackled by these schemes. After at the end of this session, class would be start after Maghrib prayer. But this one is the last slide of today's session, the generator protection. In generator protection, this one is our zone number 2. If a fault have been created in our generator, then the protection or power protection relays of generator have also been installed there to prevent the internal and external prospects or circuitry of generator. So particularly the protection relays, internal and external, deal that particular fault and also prevent the in this portion of line you can see there is no kind of protection equipment installed there, but